Good morning, everyone. Pastor Jaymes here. We are going through the Gospel of Matthew each morning um, based on the holy lectionary and the daily office texts. And so I'm not coming up with these passages. This is just what is being read all over the world by the faithful. And so we are in Matthew 24 and 25, which is called the final discourse of Jesus before he goes to the cross. He gives one more discussion. The story today, if you've been in church for a long time, will be familiar to you. But maybe we can learn something a little bit different, maybe something new, approach it in a fresh and new way. Before we do that, good morning, Mike and Alice and Stephen and Gary and Sally and Emily, George. It is good to be with you. Here's the background context for the passage for today. We should be out here in a few minutes. It's a little bit longer passage, but we'll go quickly. So I told you Matthew 24 and 25 is called the discourse passage. So now this is the kind of the setup for the whole two chapters. Now, while Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us when all these things will happen. What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" So tell us what the end is going to be like. And so today's story is going to be a story about the end. I need to let you know there's a thing called a messianic banquet. There was this idea in Judaism, especially in first century Judaism where Jesus lives, that the end was going to be like a feast, a banquet, a party. And the Aramaic joy, the word in Aramaic for joy also means feast. And so that'll play in today's passage. We're going to talk about talents. You've probably heard of the parable of the talents. That's today's parable. A talent is worth about $1,000,000. 6,000 denarii. A denarius was one day's wage. And so 6,000 of those, 60, I don't know, 600 paychecks or something like that. It's kind of a lot of money. And let me just also say, finally, the parable is absolutely not about money in any way. I mean, we use money to talk about the thing, but Jesus isn't really talking about money. I will just say right up front, the end of this parable, the meaning of this parable, Jesus is not asking us to make sure that we have a good return on our money before the end times come. That is not the goal of this passage. Jesus is not trying to make sure that we get good investments on our money. That is not his end of his discussion. Let's read the story, huh? Matthew 25, moving on, starting in verse 14. Hear now the word of the Lord. It says, "The kingdom of heaven is like." This is how you know it's a parable. What is a parable? A bowl, we get our word ball from, to throw. Para, alongside. Jesus is throwing alongside something that we know about, money. And he's throwing it alongside heaven to help us understand what the kingdom is like. That's what a parable is. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who was leaving on a trip. Jesus. After his death and resurrection, he ascended to the right hand of the Father and is currently still sitting at the right hand of the Father, right? He's gone physically from the earth. He was leaving on a trip. He called his servants, you and me, and handed his possessions over to them. This was not uncommon. Slaves or servants could take money and be in charge of things and actually could make money. Sometimes they could be wealthy. You could be a wealthy slave in Roman times if you were good at handling and managing businesses. 15. To one servant, he gave 5 valuable coins, or 5 talents, or about $5,000,000. And to another, he gave $2,000,000. And to another one, he gave $1,000,000. He gave to each servant according to that servant's ability. Then he left on his journey. 16. After the man left, the servant who had $5,000,000 or 5 talents took them and went to work doing business with them. He gained 5 more, doubled his investment. In the same way, the one who had $2,000,000, he gained 2 more, doubled his. But the servant who had received the one valuable coin dug a hole in the ground and buried his master's money. He took that $1,000,000 and he buried it into the ground. Burying money was not uncommon in the ancient world, especially if there wasn't banks around or places to store them. You put it in the ground. It was a safe place as long as you could remember where you put it. 19. Now after a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The one who had received $5,000,000 came forward with 5 additional coins, talents. He said, "Master, you gave me 5 valuable coins. Look, I've gained 5 more." His master replied, "Excellent. You are a good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, and I will put you in charge of much. Come, celebrate with me." or come participate in my joy, or if we're reading the Aramaic, come feast with me. This translation tries to do both. 22, the second servant also came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2 million bucks and I gained 2 more. His master replied, Well done, you are a good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, I'll put you in charge of much. Come celebrate with me. Notice that the master is not necessarily making it a competition about who gained more. He says the same to each servant, right? Even though they have different amounts. Just notice. 24. Now the one who had received 1 valuable coin came and said, Master, I knew that you are a hard man, and you harvest grain where you haven't sown, and you gather crops where you haven't spread seed. So I was afraid, and I hid my valuable coin in the ground. Here, you have what's yours. His master replied, You evil and lazy servant, you knew that I harvest grain where I haven't sown, and that I gather crops where I have not spread seed. I'm waiting for my slides. Hey, in that case, you should have turned my money over to the bankers so that when I returned, you could give me what belonged to me with interest. In fact, some commentators point out it's harder to dig a hole and bury $1 million than it is to take it to the bank, right? The guy did actually less than what was, took the easiest route. 28, therefore, take from him, the master says to his other servants, take from him the valuable coin and give it to the one who has 10. Those who have much will receive more, and they will have more than they need. But as for those who don't have much, even the little bit they have will be taken from them. Now take the worthless servant and throw him out into the farthest darkness. People there will be weeping and grinding teeth.
Wait a minute. You said after your salary.
I know, I have a meeting. Can I come right out? Thank you, brother. Okay. We are done with the reading. You know how we do our Bible study. We do the sword method. The point helps us remember to ask the question, what do we learn about God? Handle, what do we learn about people? The 2 blades, what are there any commands and are there examples? But before we jump into that, how do we define a talent or a coin? What is Jesus talking about? In Jesus's money parables are mostly not about money. It could be, some people have talked about it as the word talent here. It could be literal talents that you have. Spiritual gifts, talents, abilities. Some people interpret it that way. Some people interpret it as love and mercy and forgiveness. And so we're going to go with that more spiritual understanding. But I will tell you, we don't know. We know that it's not about money. Jesus is not going to give you eternal life based on how much actual money you have turned into more money. But it could be either your spiritual gifts, how you've used those, or it can be how you used love, mercy, and forgiveness. That's the interpretation that I take, because most of Jesus's other money parables have to do with love, mercy, and forgiveness. So that's the interpretation I take. You don't have to agree with me. I'm not infallible. But I can guarantee you it's not about money. What do we learn about God if that's the meaning of talent then? God cares deeply that we use the good things that he's given us on others. Love, mercy, forgiveness, that we've invested them to get a return. The results aren't the most important. It's not important whether you got the 5 or you got the 2. What's most important to God is that you attempted, that you tried, and that you made the most of the opportunity. Those are the things that are important to God. That you tried, that you didn't just hoard, or you weren't too afraid to try, to take the love, mercy, forgiveness, and spiritual gifts, I'll throw all 4 of those in, the talents that you have, and use them only on yourself, or didn't use them at all. What do we learn about people? Sometimes we're afraid to try because we don't want to fail. That is true in my case. Sometimes I'm more afraid of failing than trying. We learn that God isn't disappointed in our failure. In this story, it seems the master would not have been disappointed if they failed. He was most disappointed in not trying. And so God might be most disappointed in our unwillingness to share the love, mercy, and forgiveness that we have received with others. Jesus wants a return on that. He is giving us so much. I mean, it's millions and millions of dollars worth, right, in the story, in the parable. It's an overwhelming amount of money. I mean, the one guy has $10 million at the end of the story, right? Enough for me to retire on. That's how much. An overwhelming amount. And yet the one with the 1 million refuses to share and participate. And this is what makes Jesus, or the master, so frustrated in the story, is the unwillingness to even try. Any command to obey. Yeah, come celebrate with me. This is a lovely, lovely command that I'm going to try to participate in today. Come celebrate me. There's also spiritual law, which is a little bit like commands, except they're not as explicit. Those who have much will receive more, and they will have more than they need. But as for those who don't have much, even the little bit they have will be taken away from them. Especially when we're talking about love, mercy, forgiveness, spiritual gifts. If you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't let it flow to you and through you to others around you, Jesus is going to cut the stream off. Because it was not meant to be hoarded. In fact, it can't be. Right? It was meant to be shared. Just as we love God with our whole self, we need to love our neighbor as ourselves. And when we cut off the neighbor as our self-love, then Jesus says that love between us and the Father will also be cut off. You cannot follow Jesus and not love your neighbor. It is an oxymoron. You cannot receive the forgiveness of Jesus and not forgive your neighbor. Jesus will cut it off. 1,000,000 times he has told us this. You will be forgiven, he says, multiple times. Maybe not 1,000,000. Multiple times. You will be forgiven the amount that you forgive. In fact, that's what we pray after the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us, Father, as we forgive others. I mean, this is very central to Jesus' teaching. If you don't share the investment that has been given to you, love, mercy, forgiveness, spiritual gifts, Jesus will cut it off. And those who have little, it'll be taken from them and given to those who have much. And it is a hard lesson, but Jesus is deadly serious about how much we forgive our neighbor, how much we love our neighbor, which I love about Christianity. You cannot participate in this religion and not participate in the world. You cannot participate in God's love and not love your neighbor. Jesus says, absolutely impossible for a Christian to do so. Do we understand? You need to share that talent. You need to invest the love, mercy, and forgiveness and spiritual gifts into your community. Otherwise, Jesus is going to cut it off. If you just think you're going to sit at home all day or sit in your closet all day and just spend you and Jesus time all day, Jesus ain't having it. It's not how he made us. It's not what he intends for us. It's not the system he's setting up. Any example to follow? Not the third servant, not the lazy and wicked servant who just wants the master to give him stuff and he's just too afraid to even try or too afraid to even fail or too afraid to even move forward. No, we are like the first two servants. We're going to take what Jesus gives us and we're going to invest it in the community. Jesus has given us an embarrassment of treasure, flooding our lives with love, grace, forgiveness, joy, peace. Any unwillingness in us to share those with our neighbors, doubling that investment Jesus has made in us, is against God's will and desire for us. God is most pleased when we share these with those around us. If you hoard it, you will lose it. That's just the system that God is creating. And if we share it, he will give us more. This is the upside down nature of Jesus' economy. We believe everything is a zero-sum game. If I give money away, I have less money, right? If I give food away, I have less food. If I give a car away, I have less cars. Not so in the kingdom economy. If you give love away, you'll get more. If you give peace away, you'll give more. If you pour out yourself on behalf of others, Isaiah 58 says, God will make you a well-watered garden in the middle of a desert. This is the opposite of our thing, of our economy. The kingdom economy is the more you give away, the more you receive. The more you expand yourself and open yourself up to receive more and more because you are using it rightly and God is honoring that and he is pouring out that embarrassment of riches on you more and more and more. Here is my prayer for the day based on this passage, and then we will be on our way and I will stop preaching. Hopefully you get a better sense of what this parable is about, especially in the end times. Jesus is going to hold us accountable to the amount of love, mercy, forgiveness, and spiritual gifts that we've invested in our community. These are the things that he wants us to do. My breath prayer today, as I'm going to pray, as I chew on this, as I'm going to chew on this passage, as I'm going to meditate on this passage, my breath prayer is, help me share what I have received. Help me share what I have received. It acknowledges both that God is pouring into my life, but my responsibility. See, I have an ability and I have a responsibility. God has given me a spiritual gift. That's my ability. And now I have a responsibility to share it. Help me to share what I have received. Blessed and beloved, would you have a great day? I hope you have a lovely Tuesday. Stay cool, stay refreshed, stay hydrated. Get some time in prayer. If you have time, take a nap. I hope you have a wonderful day. Peace.